Who doesn't love a good butter chicken? And curries in general are some of the best recipes for meal prep. My version of butter chicken is a bit less traditional. I hide a pound of vegetables within the sauce. Let me show you how it's done. The first thing to do is preheat your oven to 425 Fahrenheit or 218 Celsius while you prep the chicken. A more apt title for this recipe is likely butter-ish chicken, with some of the liberties we're going to take to make this dish more macro-friendly. To make the chicken marinade, in a large bowl add a half of a cup or 113 grams of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, 1 teaspoon or 6 grams of salt, 2 teaspoons or 4 grams of fenugreek powder, 2 teaspoons or 4 grams of garam masala, and 1 tablespoon or 6 grams of Kashmiri chili powder. If you can't find Kashmiri chili powder, you could get by with just using standard chili powder or a 3-to-1 ratio of paprika to cayenne pepper. Mix the seasonings into the yogurt until they are evenly combined. Next, add in 2 pounds or 908 grams of boneless skinless chicken thighs, and you can cut off any excess skin or fat before tossing them in the bowl. Throw those chicken thighs around so that every surface, crack, and crevice has been coated evenly with the yogurt marinade. Ideally, you'll let this chicken marinate for a few hours, but if you're anything like me, you know that waiting is for dead people, so you can just cook it right away if you so please. And I'm sure as many of you have guessed, I pleased. My oven isn't quite heated yet though, so as it's finished and getting hot, we can move on to a bit of chopping. To start off the chopping, take 1 small onion or 125 grams worth and cut it into a small dice. It's all going to get blended later, so you won't need to worry too much about the size. You'll also want to mince about a tablespoon or 15 grams of garlic and a tablespoon or 15 grams of ginger. I'm a dunce and I forgot to buy these at the store, so I had to use the pre-minced stuff in the jar. Lastly, cut up around 1/4 of a cup or 20 grams of cilantro into a rough chop. This will be used as a garnish on top of the final dish. At some point you'll need to start cooking your rice, and in the final plating of this meal, you'll need 3 3/4 cups of cooked rice. Depending on what kind of rice you use, that will likely be somewhere between 1 and 2 cups of dry rice. Rinse the rice or don't, I don't care, just get the job done. And now that your oven is surely preheated, you can get back to work on that chicken. You'll want to line a sheet pan with some foil before you add the thighs. Eventually we're going to be putting this under the broiler, and if you don't use the foil, you'll almost certainly scorch some of the marinade onto your pan and it will be impossible to clean. Lightly spray the sheet pan with some oil and then spread the chicken thighs out with the smooth side facing down. When we do end up broiling this chicken, all of those ridges and corners will brown up nicely. Make sure they are evenly spaced out and have some room on the pan to promote better browning. Move them into the oven and roast at 425 Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until the thighs are about 90% of the way done. We'll come back to this chicken in a bit, but while it's cooking, you can start on the curry. I sneak some vegetables into the sauce to give this meal a bit of a nutrient boost. I use both frozen cauliflower and frozen butternut squash to achieve that. Fresh is fine if you can't find frozen. I don't use fresh because it all tastes like shit to me anyway, so why bother? Heat a large skillet over medium-high heat and add about a teaspoon or 5 grams of oil. Dump in a half of a pound or 227 grams of frozen cauliflower and a half of a pound or 227 grams of frozen butternut squash, and then a sprinkling of salt. Cook these vegetables for a few minutes so they can develop a bit of color and thaw out. If you're unable to get butternut squash where you live, I did try this recipe with carrots as well, and they are a serviceable substitute. However, they do have a stronger flavor, so I would suggest a 2-to-1 cauliflower to carrot ratio instead of the 1-to-1 like we did with the squash. After a couple of minutes, create some space in the center of that pan and add another teaspoon of oil as well as the diced onion with a bit of salt to help pull the water out. Let those onions start to develop a bit of color before clearing out the center of the pan again to bloom the spices. Add the last remaining teaspoon or 5 grams of oil, 1 teaspoon or 2 grams of Kashmiri chili powder, 1 teaspoon or 2 grams of garam masala, 1 teaspoon or 2 grams of cumin, and 1 tablespoon or 15 grams each of minced garlic and ginger, which I forgot to add at this step, but you'll see later on. One last spice that's going in this dish is turmeric. I'm choosing to wait to add it because when I was testing this recipe, I learned the hard way that even 1 gram of this nonsense will stain your blender for the rest of time. So wait until later to add it unless you have an immersion blender or you just don't care about your blender turning yellow. Next, you can reduce the heat to medium-low and pour in 1 15.5 ounce can or 439 grams of crushed tomatoes. This is the point where I realized I forgot to add the garlic and the ginger earlier, so I'm adding it here and giving it a bit of time on the heat before I mix it in. You'll also want to add in 1 cup or 240 grams of water to the pan and stir it to incorporate. Allow the contents of the pan here to come to a light boil and stew down for 8 to 10 minutes, stirring occasionally to keep things moving. While the curry is stewing, it will likely be time to take care of the chicken again. After its initial roasting time of 10 to 12 minutes, you can place the sheet pan on the top rack of the oven if it's not already there and turn the oven to broil. Your broiling element probably runs down the middle of your oven, so if you can fit your sheet pan in the long ways, you'll want to turn it that direction so that all the chicken is directly under the flame. If your pan wasn't able to fit in the oven the long ways, you'll want to rotate it after a couple of minutes so that all the chicken gets a chance to be directly under the broiler. After the top side of the chicken has sufficiently colored, remove the tray from the oven and flip the chicken over to the other side for a couple of more minutes. The broiler will help give us some deep browning on the chicken for extra flavor, but it will also make it more prone to burning, so you need to keep a close eye on it. Keeping the oven door slightly ajar can help regulate the temperature, and it makes it easier for your nose to put in some work to watch out for burning smells. Once you're happy with how it looks, remove the sheet pan from the oven and allow the chicken to rest while you finish up the curry portion. Once it's been stewing for about 10 minutes, you can move the tomato sauce from the skillet into a blender. If you have an immersion blender and a blender-friendly skillet, you could just mix everything up right there in the pan. I don't have an immersion blender, so you can see my slightly yellow tinted blender putting in the work here. Also, why is nobody talking about how well I was able to scoop all this tomato sauce out of the pan? I got almost every drop. Blend the tomatoes and vegetables for about 30 seconds or until it is as smooth as it can get. The better your blender is, the smoother this sauce will be. Now my sauce is blended and I tell my skillet, get your ass back here, and I pour the sauce back in over low heat. I don't have to worry about staining my blender any further, so now I can add in 1 teaspoon or 2 grams of turmeric, a little bit of salt to taste, 2 tablespoons or 28 grams of butter, 1 tablespoon or 16 grams of peanut butter, and 1/4 of a cup or 60 grams of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. Then I stir everything together to melt the butters and mix in the yogurt. Taste test once everything has been incorporated and adjust any of the seasonings to fit your preferences. After the chicken thighs have rested, you can cut them up into bite-sized pieces. I think roughly 1/2-inch size cubes are the best size. A lot of times in buttered chicken there are huge chunks of meat. I'm not a fan of that. Once they've been cut, add them to the sauce and stir it all together to combine. This chicken is fantastic and has tons of flavor. The bake and then broil method is my go-to way to prep chicken for meal prep. Coating it in the sauce will help it reheat more evenly in the microwave to make it last better throughout the week as well. This recipe is going to make 5 servings, so get out 5 meal prep containers, and each container is going to start with 3/4 of a cup or 112 grams of the cooked rice. Then you can just divide the chicken and sauce up evenly between the 5 dishes. If you wanted perfect portions, you would weigh the contents of the pan and divide that number by 5 to determine how much goes into each one. If you plan to eat all 5 meals by the end of the week, it doesn't make a lick of a difference if one has slightly more or less than the other because it will all even out in the end. Each dish can get a little sprinkle of chopped cilantro to make it look more visually appealing, and now you are finished. Each serving of this hidden vegetable butter chicken has about 577 calories and 41 grams of protein. Considering we took it easy on the butter and cream, this dish has a surprising amount of creaminess and the flavor only seemed to get better over the course of the week. It will last for up to 5 days in the fridge. When it comes time to reheat, I'll transfer the meal over to a glass dish and microwave in 1-minute intervals, stirring occasionally until it is hot. Now in traditional butter chicken, the sauce is extremely smooth, but because I'm using it to hide these heinous, repugnant vegetables, it won't really be possible to get that perfect texture. I know I'm going to be asked why I don't just store it in glass containers, so to get out ahead of it, the answer is because I'm a slave to the YouTube algorithm. The thumbnails do better when the meals are in the black containers, and I'm trying to be Joshy click-throughs, not Joshy passovers. The traditional prep also often uses cashews in the sauce. I chose to use the peanut butter here because I thought the sugar would help balance out some of the acidity from the tomatoes, and most people already have peanut butter in their pantries. And then the Greek yogurt and the blended cauliflower is what takes the place of the heavy cream that you would normally see in butter chicken. If you wanted to use chicken breast, you could do it in this recipe, but you have to be extremely cautious to not overcook them or else they will get dry and rubbery. What I would do is pound or cut them to even thickness, broil them for 3 to 5 minutes on each side to get some color, and then cut them and allow them to finish cooking in the sauce. If you try to cook them just like we did with the chicken thighs in this recipe, you're not going to be too happy with the end result because they're going to dry out. This version of butter chicken is already rocketing to the top of my power rankings of the greatest way to eat your vegetables. I couldn't even taste that they were in these meals, and this dish stored and reheated incredibly well over the course of the week. The full written version of the recipe is linked in the description of this video, and I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did if you decide to give it a go. Rock and roll, kiddos. See you next week.